Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's webinar organized by Funds for NGOs. Today's topic is strategies to develop individual giving as a regular income stream. I am Anutma and I'm here to facilitate this session. First of all, I want to thank each one of you for taking out time from your busy schedules. This webinar will run for 60 minutes, which includes a 45 minutes of presentation followed by a 15 minutes of Q&A session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A option on your webinar screen to post your questions and we will respond to them during the Q&A session. Let's begin with the webinar objective. The first objective is to better understand why regular giving is an important part of the fundraising mix and one that should be developed as part of an overall fundraising strategy to diversify income. Gain a better understanding of how you might recruit new supporters, be better prepared and have more knowledge about how to keep supporters and nurture their loyalty to continue donating to your cause. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available in the video section of the Funds for NGOs premium website. And now allow me to introduce today's trainer, Cheryl Hooper. Cheryl is an experienced development consultant and CEO of an international charity. She is an expert trainer and has provided training and capacity building to support international NGOs for more than 20 years. Cheryl has a BA honors degree in sociology and a master's degree in international cooperation and humanitarian aid. She has successfully developed numerous award-winning programs and secured funding from US Aid, UK Aid, Comic Relief, and several high-profile grant-making trusts and foundations with a combined value in excess of $5 million US. She has been on the judging panel for the prestigious UK Charity Times Award for the past 3 years, a published author of a guide for NGOs in youth-led peer education, and was conferred a Women of the Decade Award by the Women's Economic Forum in October 2023. Now, I kindly request Cheryl to lead the session and share screen.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and hello to every one of you wherever you are today, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for taking the time to participate today, and thanks also to Funds for NGOs for hosting and their technical support. Over the past few months, my training tutorials have focused on raising income through the main route that many NGOs take, which is applying for grants from a large range of different funders. We all know how important grant income is to an NGO, but often NGOs struggle to maintain a firm financial position when grants come to an end. So for this reason, the more we're able to develop income streams from different sources, the less prone to financial shocks will you be. This means that even during lean times, when grants come to an end and you are applying for new funds, you should be able to sustain your operations with the support of other income streams. So today I want to share my experience of how to develop regular giving as a way to diversify your income and help build a firmer financial foundation for your NGO. I hope that this webinar will help you to better understand why regular giving is an important part of the fundraising mix and one that should be developed as part of an overall fundraising strategy. You should gain a better understanding of how you might recruit new supporters, and you'll be better prepared and have more knowledge about how to keep supporters and nurture their loyalty to continue donating to your cause. So I've put here a diagram to illustrate a possible funding mix that might support an NGO without over-reliance on grants. Now, if grants are the only source of an income that you have, then many of your projects will also end when the grant ends, and you'll find yourself in a situation where there is an urgency for funding. So by putting in the effort to build a diverse range of income streams, you can protect the future of your projects and staff. So this is just a simple diagram of a pie chart that shows what you could be aiming to do with regard to funding. Whilst grants continue to bring in that really much needed income, alongside this is income generated through individuals, events, and then the last section here is churches, faith groups, schools and businesses. I mean, this isn't an exhaustive list of income streams, but the diagram is to really just get you thinking and to show you that funding and your fundraising strategy should focus beyond grant income. So before we begin to plan how you will develop regular giving, ask yourself right from the very start, why should people, individuals, support us? Why is our work important? And what difference do we make as an NGO to people's lives? But you also need to ask, do we have any weaknesses or areas that need improvement before we start looking at developing individual donors? And then what are the opportunities do we have to develop new supporters? You could look at events and campaigns that you could possibly use and other opportunities. And then finally, you're asking, what sort of competition is out there? Who are you competing with? And what other external factors need to be taken into account? So answering these questions will help to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats that should be taken into account as part of developing your strategy for individual giving. Knowing your strengths helps to understand and develop your case for support. Knowing your weaknesses ensures that you're aware of what operations you need to improve or put in place to begin with, for example, a database. Identifying opportunities will help to decide and plan where you might advertise, promote, or engage with potential supporters. And then knowing the possible threats, such as the economic climate or competition from other NGOs, should help you decide how to minimise those risks and put in place strategies to address them. So here's a top level strategy which shows the process and elements that need to be in place to develop regular giving. So we begin by developing the case for support, which should be adapted for individual supporters and different from the way you might develop a case for support for a grant application. So part of this should also be a number of things that have value so that you can explain to potential supporters what money can buy. Then it would be necessary to know how much income you think you could aim for through regular giving, broken down year by year. And after this, it should be possible to break down the income target into the number of supporters that you might need to reach that target. Having a robust database in place to record donations and supporter information, marketing materials, and so on. And then finally, a timeline for the implementation of the strategy and regular analysis of your progress and results. So let's begin with developing the case for support for individual donor prospects. So the questions I've put here are typical questions that an individual who doesn't know your work and who doesn't know your NGO might ask. So who do you support and what difference do you make? How can you prove this? Well, what evidence do you have? How can we trust and know that if we support you, that the funds we give you will be spent in the right way and reach the people in need? What examples can you give of how you've helped? How many people do you help and why is it that they need help? What happens if they don't receive the help? And then a very common one, why can't they get help from the government or other sources? And another common one, I can only give a very small amount, so what's the point? So if you're able to answer those questions, you should have the basis for a strong case for support. And then if you have additional photos and videos to explain the need and back this up, even better. So when you start developing your case for support, start by answering these questions. And then you should start forming a picture of what you can say to individuals. So just to give you an idea of how regular giving can contribute a significant amount each year to your NGO, I've put some basic examples of how funds can build up without asking individuals to make huge financial commitments. In fact, just on a very basic level, you will see that asking an individual to donate just $2 a month could form a solid foundation of financial support as you recruit more people to support your work. A regular donation of $2 a month is unlikely to make an impact on many working people, and especially those in careers that are well paid. So just on a simple level, you can see that asking individuals for different amounts according to their personal circumstances could bring in an estimated $5,100 a year. So behind this, of course, needs to be a strategy which should focus on the number of supporters you aim to recruit and the different amounts you hope to secure from those different target groups. So I'm just giving you some very simple figures here, and obviously you can adapt this according to your own networks. So when talking to a group of individual supporters, it's always helpful to use examples of how different values of donation can still make a difference, so that those supporters who perhaps think their support isn't worth giving because it won't make a difference can be reassured that even the smallest amount, if given regularly, can really change somebody's life. So if you equate the amount to something they may be able to relate to, such as a cup of coffee, that can help people to think, well, if I don't buy a coffee on my way to work one day a week, I could still donate that instead. So you're not asking people to not buy a coffee every single day on their way to work, but maybe one of those days they may think, let's just give it a miss and donate that amount instead. So before you begin developing regular giving, make sure that you have a reliable database to capture supporter information and record donations. This is important so that you can always remember who gives regularly and how much, so that you're able to thank them and keep them updated. So when I talk about systems for thanking donors, what I mean here is to decide on the frequency and the type of communication you will send supporters to thank them and keep them informed about your work and the difference that they are making. So it's not just what the NGO is making, it's what the difference the supporter is making. So you could think, is this a monthly newsletter sent by email? Is it a written newsletter sent to them by post? What type of thing should you be including in the content, and so on? And then, of course, it's important to have robust financial systems in place so that when individuals begin to give donations on a regular basis, you're able to record and track how much has been donated and also where and how that money has been spent so that you can report back on those donors. But individual income shouldn't be about getting donations from individuals on an occasional basis or when you hold a fundraising event. Income from individuals, if you're really developing this as a strategy, should focus on regular giving so that the purpose of building this income stream is to recruit new supporters who are prepared to donate regularly each month or quarter or annually. This will eventually become a reliable and steady income stream that will add to income already obtained through grants and other sources. So the starting point is to recruit new supporters, but to know your audience and know who is likely to support your work. So if you're starting from scratch, friends, family, and other contacts through church or faith groups, associations, business networking, and clubs are most likely to support your NGO because they also want to support and encourage you because they are personally connected to you. Therefore, begin with people you know as a starting point. Once you have personal connections supporting you, then you can begin to look at friends of friends because they too are likely to support because they have a connection through their friends. And then the wider community would include professionals you know, individuals, churches, associations, and other networks. So the object here is to recruit supporters who would be interested in knowing more about your work and the difference they could make. So at this point, the amount they give doesn't matter. People are more likely to agree to being contacted and kept in touch if there is no pressure to give. Once they receive communications from you, it should be possible then to ask for a small regular amount, and this would be the start of the supporter journey. So your case for support is crucial for successful regular giving from individuals. Remember that whilst the need for funds is the same when you're applying for a grant, the language and the way you speak or write should be different to a grant application. So many individuals connected to you may not necessarily understand development issues, but they want to help. And they want to see that if they supported you, then their support would make a difference. Therefore, it's good to know what money can buy so that you can explain this in marketing materials and when you are speaking to people. This means being able to provide a clear example of what money would buy if somebody supported you. For example, $5 might provide a nutritious meal for a child every day for a week, or $150 will train a person to be a nurse, and so on. It's important to provide examples of small amounts as well as larger amounts that will make a difference, so that anybody who wants to give will understand that no matter how small their donation is, it will make a real difference. However, remember, we're looking at regular giving now. So if you talk about $5, for example, then say $5 a month will enable a child to go to school. Or you could say $50 a year or something like that. Whether you're giving a talk or have an information leaflet, it's always effective to include quotes from beneficiaries because quotes bring your case for support to life through personal stories. People relate to people, and this is all about developing loyalty and relationships. So the more you can do this, the better it will be. Be clear on what you want and make it easy for people to sign up. If you don't provide a donation form when giving a talk and show people that they can give online through a website as well, then you're less likely to recruit people because by the time they've returned home, the momentum will have left. And as life gets in the way, many people will fail to sign up despite wanting to. So, right, it's important that you know what you're going to say and that you can talk about things in a simple way that people who don't work in development will understand. Try and relate the case for support to the audience so that they can relate to what you're saying. So, for example, if your NGO supports orphans and vulnerable children, perhaps you're talking to a group of parents after school. You could begin by asking, how many of you have children here today who attend this school? Can you remember the joy you felt when you first set eyes on your baby? We're the lucky ones. And then you can talk about the number of children who are living on the streets or who don't have parents and whatever your cause supports. It isn't helpful to make an audience feel guilty and force them to give out of obligation. So whilst you want them to relate to the work, it's important that you focus on the difference you are making and how they, the individuals you're talking to, can help. You could do this by giving a personal success story of a beneficiary and demonstrate how they're happy and fulfilled after being supported by your NGO. So decide on a campaign name to kick off your recruitment drive. So when I talk about a theme or a campaign name, what I mean is that individuals often get inspired if there is something they can relate to and understand. So, for example, this could be something like help a child go to school, become a friend of whatever your NGO's name is. By providing a theme as part of the recruitment campaign, you're immediately providing the individual with a reason to give and support your NGO, and you're giving them a call for action. So it's important that you are actually giving them a call for action and not just talking about it. A vague recruitment drive that's based on just supporting the work of your NGO isn't likely to have the same response. So think about the theme and the campaign name, and also think about when would be the best time of year to launch the appeal and publicise it. So launching the campaign at a time that's important to your community. So it may be Christmas or Eid or Ramadan or a particular date such as AIDS Awareness Day would also work. The point is that I want to point out to you is that the theme and the campaign name is really important, and it's good to have time and think about this with your team and come up with something creative so that you can plan your strategy around that. So marketing for NGOs is an important element of fundraising that will bring results and increase awareness of your work and the social impact of your projects. After all, NGOs, we all need to attract a larger amount of people to our cause. So this way, social media can amplify our messages and stimulate contributions. But marketing needs to be even more humanized and emotional because we're talking about attracting donors and helping communities and not corporate profit. So your recruitment drive to get individual supporters needs to be a good mix of different ways to engage potential supporters. So, you could have interactive social media asking people to answer a question, how they feel about things. You might have public events or give talks at churches, faith groups, community groups, local businesses, having a stand at a local market or event. But backing this up should be the social media that uses all the various touch points that potential supporters might use. So we're talking about things like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and so on. And also in some cases, community radio. So these days, social media is the most powerful way to engage potential donors alongside events that people attend in person. So when you begin planning your strategy, make sure that you include all those things and don't just list them, but be clear on which social media platforms you can use and what the content should be. What do you need to say in those posts? There are platforms where you can schedule for free social media posts on Instagram, for example, and you can make your posts in advance. You just put them into the calendar and schedule them, and then they just go out automatically at the right time. So it doesn't always have to cost money. Sometimes it may take a while to build a supporter base, and then on other occasions, an event may bring in a lot of new supporters in one go. However, regardless of how many people sign up or want information and updates from your NGO, the important thing is to retain the level of support and to encourage regular giving as a result. Just because individuals have shown interest in supporting your NGO initially, this won't necessarily translate to regular giving and staying loyal without hard work and trust that has to be earned by you. So what I've found is that quite often with events, people get quite excited, they're very interested, but the work really starts after the event when the NGO needs to stay in touch with those people. So let's assume that you now have a list of supporters that you've got through an event who you've recruited and a publicity campaign. Remember that when you form a database of names and contact details, privacy is paramount, and donors need to understand and agree to being contacted by you, and also that their details will remain confidential. So you can do this by putting on marketing materials and donation forms that individual contact details will be completely confidential and secure. Cultivating supporters needs regular communication from you, but communication that isn't inundating them to the point of filling up their email inbox. So think about the content and the quality of communication you need to send to supporters. Use photos and personal stories to engage supporters, and to begin with, focus on providing information without asking for money. And then finally, look at the database and begin to analyse who is supporting you, so that this will provide an appropriate information and data to help you develop a strategy for stewardship that will build donor loyalty. So it's important to capture the right information from individuals when they sign up to your recruitment drive. If you can, on the form that people fill in, include additional information that will help you to better understand who they are. So you could do this through a tick box, which they can choose to fill in or not fill in. Things that you could include, for example, might be boxes that indicate an age range. You could include different methods of communication preferences, such as, would you prefer to receive updates from us via email, post, telephone? And then finally, you could include a tick box asking how the supporter has heard about you, so that you can see where your recruitment drive is working. And, a tick box that gives them a chance to say via personal connection, friend, work network, and so on. And younger supporters may prefer email and social media, whilst older supporters may prefer postal communication. So the more you can tailor and personalise your communication, the more likely you will nurture that loyalty. So some of you may have come across this before in fundraising. It's called the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. And basically, it's something that a lot of fundraisers apply in all parts of their fundraising, not just in individual giving. But what you will find is that there's a very good chance that 80% of your income is likely to come from 20% of your most loyal supporters. So what you might find is you have 100 supporters, but out of those 100 supporters, you might find that 80 of them are relatively good at giving, maybe give occasionally or attend events and things like that. But then 20 of them are the ones that are continuing to support you. So once you've identified your 20% of supporters, you can focus your effort on really ensuring those supporters are looked after properly and thanked for their efforts. But the 20-80 rule doesn't mean that you should focus effort on just the 20% of regular committed supporters whilst neglecting the remaining 80%. What this is about is that the 20-80 rule provides a focus on the level of effort to put into different stakeholder groups. So what you might find is that 80% receive a newsletter once every 6 months or once every 3 months, something like that. But the 20% who really support you regularly might receive an impact report as well. In between that communication, they may receive personal communication from the executive director as well. So all supporters need and should receive regular updates and communication. But if you know who your most loyal and committed supporters are, it's possible to do additional things to acknowledge their support and keep them motivated. So the 20-80 rule also applies to the quality of communication that you send to supporters. So think about ensuring that all supporters receive appropriate and timely updates and thank yous from your NGO, and that they're easy to read and easy to digest. So don't have lots and lots of words. You know, photos with small paragraphs explaining the difference their donation has made is perfect. Sometimes, there's many supporters who are busy people and they only need headline information and updates. So for those supporters who've been identified as the 20% who are more committed, then, as I said before, you may want to provide additional impact reports or offer the opportunity to meet you in person to hear about the work you're doing. You could organise remote Q&A sessions to meet your team, or to even take video footage of some of your projects and show them that. The main thing is that what you're trying to do is to acknowledge their support and make them feel special. And all of those things really supports donor loyalty. So donor segmentation is the process of separating your donor base into subgroups or segments based on the qualities they have in common. So it could be geographical location, it could be age, it could be donor status, such as their link to your NGO. For example, they may be friends or family, or it may be the amounts that they donate. So the point is, by segmenting donors, you have a strategy to split your donor population into smaller groups based on similarities in giving preferences or communication preferences or other factors. So, you may segment your donors by communication. Some of them may only want email communication. Some of them may only want to be contacted twice a year. It's that kind of thing. But by grouping similar donors together, even though it takes time, the hard work will pay off because your communication efforts will be more successful when donors and supporters feel that you are taking the time to get to know them. So even though this may take a little while, I would definitely say it's worth having a look at this and spending some time on really getting to know who your donors are. So segmenting a large number of donors into manageable groups obviously needs a systematic approach. So you should begin by grouping donors according to the category that matters most to your NGO. So within those groups, you may have additional subgroups. So you could end up with donors who live in a particular area, their donation history, what type of communication method they prefer. I find that actually segmenting donors based on their frequency of giving and the amount they give is a really good way to start, because then you're automatically beginning to understand who are the donors who are the most committed and who are giving the most frequently and larger amounts. And so you can tailor your communication for that. So your strategy for retaining donors should begin with the segmentation process. And then that will put you in a good position to decide the level and frequency of contact, the type of content you will write and send, and who receives what. So as I said, for those donors who've been identified as being the most committed or the highest level of supporters, then you can build into your strategy additional ways to make them feel appreciated. And once donors are regularly supporting your NGO, it would be possible over time to contact them again to see if they would increase their regular donation. Or you may decide to hold a special appeal, which would be in addition to the regular giving. So when you have identified your most loyal and committed supporters, you can start using them to help you recruit new supporters. So you're not asking them at this point to give any more money. What you're asking them to do is to spread the word and to share the work of your NGO with their own networks and their own friends. And often people will be glad to help if they're asked. And sometimes individuals are also happy to fundraise on your behalf if they are asked and if they are supported. And what I mean by that is by providing them with a fundraising pack or ideas or how they might hold a coffee morning or, things like that. So many individuals are happy to get involved as a way to give back. And so a social gathering initiated by a friend or a colleague could also be a way to fundraise in a small way and recruit new supporters for your NGO. So as an idea for a campaign to get more supporters, you could develop something like Find a Friend campaign, which would be aimed at existing supporters to ask if they could find a friend to support your cause. Remember that developing individual giving as a regular income stream needs to be strategic. So this is about finding a regular source of income to support your projects and NGO overheads outside of grants. The good thing about regular giving is that most often it's unrestricted. And so it can really help in terms of building that financial stability that all NGOs need. So basically, it will also help to make decisions on how many supporters you need to help meet your costs. And this should be the focus and basis for a strategy. So if you remember, when I went back right at the very beginning, I was giving you examples of $2 a month. You know, how many supporters would you need to recruit to donate $2 a month? How many supporters would you need to recruit to donate $10 a month, and so on. So just to recap, individual income is a good source of additional income outside of grants, and one that you should really seriously consider. But you do need to have a planned strategy in place before you begin, to try and recruit new supporters and obviously maintain that support. So this might start with friends and family, but then they will have their own networks, and those will also be a good source of support for recruitment. Always have a campaign name or a theme so that people can understand what their support will do and the difference they will make. So, for example, help a child go to school for a year, or become a friend of your NGO, and so on. And then providing examples of what money can buy in different donation sizes. So writing an effective appeal to recruit new supporters can take time and needs careful planning. So you need to really think about starting early. Make your appeal, whether you're giving a talk or using social media or letters, make it center around the potential supporter. So personalize the content in a letter or when you're giving a talk by addressing the letter with their name, and use the language that is simple, sincere, and inspirational. Potential supporters need to feel inspired and excited that their small donation will make a tangible difference to people's lives, and that they will hear about the difference that they've made through regular updates from your NGO. And tell a story about a beneficiary, show photos, and make sure there is a call to action, and make it easy for them to fill in or sign up, either online through an email communication that takes them to a secure donation page, or a standing order for a bank. And the important thing is to use that you language. So try and personalize it as if you're talking to one person in particular and not just an anonymous appeal. Okay, so the kind of things to avoid is neglecting that element of donor stewardship. So what I mean by that is you focus, all your strategy is all about recruiting those supporters. But once you've got them, you fail to build the relationship with those supporters. You don't communicate enough with those supporters. The communication is too impersonal. The language isn't appropriate, and you're either giving them too much communication or not enough communication. So it's really important to make sure that you address that, and to use messaging that is directed at them, using that you language, using examples of what money can buy, you know, how much their donation makes a difference, and use beneficiary stories to explain that. Another common mistake is to overcomplicate the signing up process. Remember, individuals tend to be busy people who want to donate or want to make a difference, but they definitely don't want the time. So what you really need to do is to try and make the signing up for regular giving as simple as possible. So if you are sending an email out with a newsletter, have a link in that newsletter All they have to do is click on that link. It will take you through to a donations page on your website. It's secure, and they can set up a regular standing order that way. Another mistake, as I've spent some time on talking about segmenting donors, but again, the mistake is to send the same messages to all donors, regardless of giving, the level of giving and their interest. Nothing will annoy a supporter more if you send them a blanket email when they have been giving a regular amount, a significant amount, and you are talking about things that don't really resonate with their giving. So they may have donated particular amount to go to a particular school, and your email is just a general email about everything that you do, when in fact really it would be better to give them an update on the school that they're supporting. So it's things like that are ways to, if you avoid that, that's one way of making sure you keep that donor loyalty. Ignoring cancellation. So that's another one where what will happen is sometimes, for various circumstances, somebody may have started donating to you and then they change their mind, or their financial situation changes and they want to stop donating. And the mistake is to just change your database, don't send them any communication, and that's the end of it. One way to really nurture that loyalty is to still send them a thank you for everything that they've donated up until that time, and to really explain what a difference they have made and to thank them for their loyalty and support, because you never know, they may come back to you. And then celebrating milestones. So it's really good to look at, your strategy and really recognize where you have come from, and, to send thank yous to donors to say, through the past year, we have managed to do this, 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 and this, and to really celebrate your successes and show donors that they're making a difference. And then the other thing is lack of buy-in and support. Now, what I mean here is thinking that you will start a strategy to recruit individual donors, but you don't actually give it enough time or support, and you don't really give it the effort that it needs. So I think, if you put it into your fundraising strategy, you really need to decide the level of effort that you are going to make, because whatever the level of effort you put into it is likely to give you the level of effort, the results back. So cultivating a new individual program, giving program, it can be an exciting project for an NGO. Many supporters, many NGOs get new supporters without a specific strategy, but often this doesn't provide sufficient income and opportunities can be lost. So whether you already have an established regular giving program, or if you're starting from scratch, it's always a good exercise to review your approach and check that you're adopting a strategic approach to recruitment and retaining individual supporters to give regularly to support your work. Because the whole point of this is to create a reliable income source that will support you into the future. And by doing this, you will begin to diversify your income and have a more balanced portfolio of income streams. So I hope you've gained a better understanding of how you might recruit new supporters to your NGO and how they might become regular givers. And whilst it can be time consuming, it can be something that can become part of everybody's remit who works in your organisation. So remember, you've got field workers who may take visitors to visit projects. You may have meetings with CEOs, may have meetings with businesses or government officials, visits to school, or wherever your work takes you. You are most probably meeting people all the time who might be a potential supporter or who might know somebody who could be a potential supporter. So think about your fundraising strategy and how you can build and develop regular giving as part of your fundraising in addition to grant income. Thank you so much again for attending this training. I do value your feedback, and I hope you'll join me again for my next webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Cheryl, for the insightful presentation. Participants, now we have started our Q&A session. Please send in your questions. The first question is, how long does it typically take to see results from an individual giving strategy?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think that, individual giving does take time, okay? There's no doubt about it. But if you remember, my first tip was to start with people you know. So I would start with friends, family, your own personal business networks. And I would start with asking for a small amount that actually will make very little difference to their circumstances. So when I people to donate the equivalent of a cup of coffee on their way to work, I would start with that. So if you had an event and you got quite a lot of interest, I would like to think that you might be able to start seeing some results if you really put the effort in within about 6 months. 6 to 12 months, I would say, if you really put the effort in.
Thank you for your input, Cheryl. The next question is, what are the most effective ways to recruit new individual donors with limited resources?
Yeah, another good question. I would say, from my own experience and knowing other people who've done this, quite often public talks seem to generate a lot of interest. So I know of strategies that have worked where someone will give a public talk. They will go and they will give a talk to a group of people. It may be at a school, it might be parents at a school, it may be depending on what the work is of your NGO. So say, for example, you're a health NGO, okay, and you're working in the health sector, then you may want to be able to try and arrange a talk to a group of doctors or health workers at a hospital, something like that. And you would need to perhaps make it easy. So when you contact the organisation to see if you can do that, make it at a time that would be easy for people to go to. So, find out is a lunchtime talk a good time, or an early evening talk a good time? And usually, if you focus your talk around their own interests, so whatever your NGO is doing, if you manage to get a group of people who are associated with the same thing, so, if it's children, it could be a wide range of people. It could be parents, it could be health workers, it could be teachers, all sorts. But what I've found is that a really engaging, interesting talk about your NGO and the work you're doing and the difference you're doing and the programs and the need can generate a lot of interest. And on the back of that, people sign up. What happens is that you can have leaflets and flyers available, and a form for people to say, I'm interested in knowing more. And that will be a good way to recruit new supporters. So I would say, if you've got limited resources, public talks in some way, they don't have to be big, just talking to a group of people, but frequently you might find that you're beginning to get sign-ups on the back of that. So I have noticed when I've had other people do talks on my behalf that that's generated quite a lot of interest.
Thank you, Cheryl, for your input. The next question is, most donors are looking to make donations and get tax rebate. What happens when you are in a country that doesn't offer tax rebate to external country donors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I can't really sort of answer that, because obviously the tax implications are different for different countries. And it's true, I think, in the UK, for example, if you donate, then some of that donation is tax, is something that comes off your tax liability. So I can't really answer that. I mean, all I would say is that I think focus on amounts that people can afford without it making a massive difference to them. So, there is a scheme in the UK called Give As You Earn, and it may be something that in other countries there is a chance to do something similar. I can't say, it depends country to country. But the principle behind it is that people, when they get paid each month, their salary, out of that salary, they commit to giving a small amount to a cause that is close to their heart. And it might be a very small amount. It might only be the equivalent. It may only be $5, for example, or £5. But what happens is it's taken at source, so that they don't do anything. When they get their pay, automatically $5 or £5 has been taken away, and it's gone straight to that charity or to that NGO. And it's called Give As You Earn. But there may be schemes like that in other countries, I can't say. But the thing about Give As You Earn, what's really good and what works, is that charities and NGOs, they do a presentation to groups of businesses. So what will happen is you make an appointment to a large corporation. Say it's an insurance company. It has 500 employees. You go to their HR department and you ask, is it possible to come and do a lunchtime talk to your employees? And then what you do is you turn up and you do a nice short talk about the work that you're doing, the difference you're making, and then you ask people if they would be interested in supporting on a small amount. And as I said, make it small enough that actually it makes very little difference to somebody. It would be difficult for somebody who's earning regularly to say, no, I don't want to give $2 a month, you know? So it's one way to do it. I would say that the give as you earn that we have here in the UK may not be possible in other countries, but the principle of it, in terms of going into businesses and talking to employees to give each month when their pay packet arrives, is something that you could adopt.
Thank you for your input, Cheryl. Dear participants, due to time limitations, we cannot cover all the questions posted here. As now we have reached the end of the webinar, I want to thank each one of you for your active participation. And we would also like to thank you, Cheryl, on behalf of the entire team. Participants, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for today's session. Your input is crucial in helping us to improve. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to contact us at support@fundsforngos.org. The feedback form will appear on your screen in a moment. Once again, thank you, everyone, and to all the participants. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good day.